Frank, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
All right. So my name is Frank, obviously, as seen there. I was born and raised in New York City, multiracial parents, multi-religious, multicultural parents. In fact, I even grew up in the community built for the United Nations Diplomatic Corps and went to the United Nations school. So extreme kind of multicultural growing up. That had some good advantages to it because I never saw two people of the same color in a row growing up. So to me, humans are just that. I've never really boxed them up too much. And then, apropos your show or the conversation we'll have, at 14, I had a born again experience. Uh, my mom from India thought it normal to send kids to boarding school. She accidentally sent me to one of the preeminent Christian boys boarding schools in America, the world, and the orientation was a tent meeting, and I responded, and all your classical "give your life to Jesus" type of stuff. Born again at 14 became quite an intense Christian. During my college years, they were the Vietnam rock and roll era, and I became a searcher. I studied a lot of religions and a lot of non-religious type of behavior of the time. A lot of rock concerts, a lot of traveling around. But somehow during my college years, um, I was searching beyond Christianity. So I searched through most religions at the time. And then at the very end of my college years, a unification person showed up at my door, knocked on the door. Oh, I should say, Tom, that partway through this search, I ended up getting very, very seriously into yoga and Zen in college. And in that process, I had an experience as strong in that side of religious practice as the Christian one. So at 14, I had your classic Jesus, born again, theistic God. And then at around 18 or 19, I had this kind of unitary consciousness. All is God, all God is us, we are God, and so on. So I had two absolute versions of the two basic religious impulses in the world by the time I was 20. And I was trying to put them together. And and then at 21 on the nose, a couple of days later, a unification person shows up at my door, says, "Hi, we're a new group in town, a spiritual group, and we harmonize East and West and harmonize religion and science." And so I had a rule to I had to investigate every spiritual path that presented itself to me, no matter how goofy it looked. It was I called it the Yoda rule. It didn't have to look like Jesus or look cool. It was my Yoda rule. So I had to go to this guy's teachings. And long story short, I ended up in the unification group at 21, and I'm still in it. So I think that the reason why I'm with you today is because you reached out to the unification group. So that's a little bit about my background, real short, up into the early years. Very quickly in the intervening years, I together, all of this is together with Sun Myung Moon. He asked me to go study. I studied at Vanderbilt University, got a doctor of philosophy and religious studies, the history of Christian thought. I ran the interreligious work under Reverend Moon, and still do. Even though he's gone, I still do interreligious work. So I have a lot of familiarity with a lot of different religious beliefs. And plus, I have one of my own, namely this unification path. The last thing I'll say, because I won't use up your time, the last thing I'll say is that the relationship with Jesus that began at 14 never went away. It always stayed through all my experimentation. It stayed through, and it remains inside of the unification life I lead. So that's real quick. We could, anybody talk about themselves forever, but I don't, I really want to let you run your show as it should be run.
Cool. So I also recently started a church group, kind of a religion. It's very secular though, so there's no God. It's based on my model of morality, and so I can empathize with the benefits of having religious groups. And that's a good positive thing that religion has provided. But I am, of course, an atheist. I don't believe there is a God.
You're
Uh,
right.
so I think that the natural world and science best explains everything about the universe we see, and so I don't think there's a strong reason to believe that there is a God or Jesus or any of the deities of any of the religions. So could you tell me
Right.
some of the reasons that you believe that there is a God, that Jesus is true?
Yeah, for me, it's entirely subjective. It's entirely personal. For some reason or another, I always did think that, uh, and I've always remained open to being wrong. I'm still open to being wrong, but what happens is once you pick something, and as long as you're true to your conscience, you grow in that, right? So my assumption is, or what I thought common sense, both experience and common sense, is that there's a God, always ready to be wrong about that, because it's not a visible, tangible type of thing, right? You're just kind of compiling phenomena that adds up to God for you, and then you travel along that path, and and so. For me, the most important element about this question, or our conversation, is not whether or not there is one, but it's a relational type of thing. So if I just give an example, if somebody told me that, if I if as a result of this little encounter, I grow to have a relationship with you, you and I do stuff now and then, maybe one or two visits in 8 years or something, like, grow to like you immensely. And then if someone kept insisting to me that you don't exist, uh, it, it would remain a possibility for me. I could have invented you. I could have imagined all the things that I've been doing with you, etc. It would just seem unlikely. For me, it would make more sense that you do. And so, in a similar way, I start with God, start to try to develop a relationship with God, and so the issue for me is kind of, it's not one too much of proof or evidence, or lining things up, a yes or no. It's more kind of the dignity and decency of a relationship. I've been in this relationship for decades. Uh, I have a great deal of fondness for God. He's put me through hard times, and basically I experience Him as kind and supportive and helpful. And so my response is not really evidences for or something like that. It's more in the realm of simple decency, or dignity, or propriety. It's a long time relationship, and um, again, it's possible God doesn't exist. Similarly to, if someone were to tell me after 10, 15 years that you don't exist, they might be able to prove it, but it gets to be ever more unlikely the more and more you build up what speaks to you, and what is confirmed by your experience.
So are you worried by the fact that there are so many like fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions in the human brain? And it seems like a lot of people believe things that don't exist. And so from my perspective, when I consider relationships or something that I had, specifically Christianity, when I tried to analyze the different fallacies and biases that are we know about that humans succumb to very easily, I found out that a lot of my justifications for believing were of those kind, the kind that we know don't work. And that led me to one of the reasons I stopped believing, because I realized that the only reason I did believe was because I was motivated to. Emotionally, I wanted the God to be there. And the arguments and evidence that I found I was using to try to justify belief ended up being fallacious in the ways that we know don't work. And so, have you had that concern, and do you look at your relationship with God critically like that to try to find out if the justifications that you use are of the many kinds that we know don't work in human cognition?
Um, n- Not especially. I think we're always in danger of that with absolutely everything we do. Is that accurate? Did I understand? Like what you're describing, um, we could end up being a bad parent or a bad friend because of the very same things, right?
Yeah.
And so, uh, and so in my case, my concern primarily is does the person's path or way or convictions um, result in them being what strikes me in my construct as a good person, as a kind person, as a decent person, as a helpful person. This is more what I'm looking for uh, in what I would call to guard against these types of matters that you've described. You described them so eloquently. I can't remember them that well, but these are fallacies of the mind or habits of the mind or things that lead people to false or wrong beliefs. My concern primarily is, does a person's belief system uh, result in them becoming a malignant individual, harmful to people? Um, and so that's my measure. What I worry about with the list you provided is not really what results in an affirmation of theism or not, but rather what results in the quality of the individual in terms of their impact on uh, in their human social environment and on the planet, and et cetera. Uh, Goodness is my issue more primarily than correctness on things that ultimately can't be proven one way or the other.
Do you think that the goodness of a person or a society has tells us anything about the truth? Because I think that people can be really good, but the beliefs that they have may not have anything to do with reality. Because I know there's some scientists who are very good at describing reality, but they were very very bad people, very bad people who
Correct.
did lots of bad things. And so for me, what's true about the universe and whether or not people are good seem to be two different questions. I wouldn't say that
Mm,
one has any relevance to the other.
mm. Um, so one of the things you can imagine, I was had a lot of thoughts in anticipation of this because I've watched you and I know how clear and intelligent you are. So you're going through little anticipatory exchanges and arguments and things like that. At least I did. And so uh, the the issue of truth and goodness. Um, One of the things that I thought of or prepared or wanted to present was the idea that we have intellect, emotion, and will. Human beings are constructed by these things. And whether or not something is true actually is a function of the harmonized capacity of these three things. Not all of truth is strictly limited to. So a scientist will be working with the full force of that person's intellectual training, talents, and so on and so forth. And then there will be something that will happen to that person that leads them to the resolution or solution or breakthrough that they were hoping to attain scientifically. And that might come from the function of a different dimension of our construct as human beings. So that the mental or intellectual or what's typically relegated to truth seeking, all that can do is make best guesses. It always takes a leap of faith beyond what the intellectual is capable of assembling. We get the preponderance of evidence is the best we can get. And then from there, additional faculties have to come to have impact. So finally, something else other than mere intellectual uh, kind of assembling of data. Finally, something else has to move each human being every moment. Uh, uh, you, yeah. On the issue of truth and goodness, um, if you're limiting truth to kind of intellectual propositions, you can't. This is why intelligent and people who are working close to what's likely true can be doing bad things because they're malformed individuals. There isn't a lot of balance between all the elements that cause human behavior. So that's I hope that's somewhat of a response. A human being is a whole thing. The primary thing that'll determine whether or not a human being is good, in my opinion, is the extent to which they're capable of suspending self-interest for the positive welfare of another person. That's all it is. And that isn't even a rational proposition. It's a different set of faculties at work which push a person toward that capacity.
What were the three things you mentioned?
I mentioned intellect, emotion, and will. Something like that. Words are always short, but something like that. And
And you mentioned that these three working together are better at assessing truth than just intellect, I think. Is that what you were saying?
yes, they all participate in in cre- that final leap of faith in which someone acts with their best hope that they're in relationship to what's true.
And how does that work to give us closer knowledge of reality than just using intellect? Because that's the part I think I'm not quite understanding. I think that our will and our desires, our emotions, typically lead us are motivators to give us ideas to search for things, but I don't
Yes.
think they help us come to conclusions. I think we have to use the intellect to weed out all of the bad examples. So I think that the emotion and the will give us hypotheses, and there's just lots and lots of hypotheses, and it's totally fine to make up whatever hypothesis you want. But then you need to use the internet to weed out the less reliable ones. So I wouldn't say that it's you start with intellect and then you add in emotion and will. I think it's you start with emotion and will, and then you filter out of those possibilities the ones that are the least reliable.
Mhm. What I was trying to communicate was that the human being is a whole integrated operation of that all the time, uh, and each one has a function. The one that's most highly respected, uh, uh, improperly so, in my opinion, is the intellect. All the intellect is, by my measure, is an enormously helpful faculty, as are the cultivation and development of will and the cultivation and development of emotion. And so the intellect can never conclude. There's never sufficient evidence to conclude with absolute certainty literally anything whatsoever. Its job is to organize, assemble, and assess and collect the highest likelihood of how I'm going to make my decisions, design my actions, uh, posi- uh, behave in my relationships. The intellect is a glorious and magnificent servant of that larger thing that I must be, but it never has the capacity to finally conclude with certainty. Every proposition has has something to at, at least tickle or tease that what you're concluding might in fact not be the case. And so the whole human being is an integrated force of these faculties. They're not serial, they're not separated. They serve one another. Um,
Well, so I think I would agree with you there that human being is comprised of both emotion and intellect and will to some extent. But the way I see it is that emotion and will drive us in many different directions, random directions. I like chocolate ice cream. That's my will. But I know that with my intellect, if I eat too much chocolate ice cream, I gain weight. And so I probably shouldn't be eating chocolate ice cream. And so it seems like emotion and will give us desires in all directions of all kinds of desires. And then we need to use our intellect to say, okay, our emotion is wrong about this. We shouldn't do this. Our will, we shouldn't will this. Those kinds of things. I think the same thing applies to hypotheses about the universe. So I can have a desire to say want there to be an ultimate being of some kind, but then I have to use my intellect to be like, well, is there evidence for it? Is it one of the fallacious reasoning kinds? And then try to filter out the emotional beliefs that I want to have that aren't supported by evidence. And so whether or not we have certainty, I think we do have certainty about one thing, that I exist. I think I can have certainty about that, but I don't see why it matters whether or not we have certainty. I think what matters is um, what the evidence indicates, and if we should follow the evidence wherever it leads. And I think that if the evidence doesn't indicate what we will or desire, then we probably shouldn't believe it. Just like if I will ice cream, I probably shouldn't just eat ice cream all day.
yes. There's two things. I hope I remember them in what you just said. One is that I don't think that uh, one necessarily chooses a right course of action simply due to the evidence. As we all know, uh, there will be a person who knows beyond a shadow of a doubt, with certainty, that too much chocolate ice cream will be detrimental to them, and they eat it until they're 400 pounds, and they're still going. But there might be like one word of the first girl that ever cast eyes at him and said, "I can see through all these troubles, and please, and that might be the evidence never helped that person at all. So there's something else that could, and then this person just turned around and tried to be something for somebody or whatever it did. So the evidence is not, even though he's always known ice cream, or she has always known ice cream is bad. So that's what I'm guessing of this more dimension of things. The other thing I say in this set of thoughts I had a little bit in anticipation of being together, that there's two different dimensions of reality. There's the causal, or there's three actually. There's the causal or intentional, that is purely non-tangible, non-material, causal, intentional. Then there is the invisible, which is still material and subject to rational and scientific inquiry and the assemblance of evidence. And then there is the pure physical, testable, material reality. And I think each of these three different elements of the reality in which we live and of which we're a part uh, don't necessarily lend themselves equally to the style of evidence collecting uh, of each different dimension. So if I were just to see whether or not the transmission, if I put the transmission in my car right or something like that, there's a set of scientific approach to doing that properly that is appropriate to raw metal transmissions, gears, etc., and so on and so forth. There's another thing, back to the ice cream example, that I don't really see, or I have no way of seeing. There's you can use microscopes and things like that, but there's an invisible reality in which I'm applying the preponderance of evidence. But there's finally a dimension of things which has to do with what's intentional or causal. And I think that it is not reasonable, or maybe it's reasonable, but I don't think it works personally to demand that applying the rational inquiry into the purely non-tangible, non-substantial reality. That we don't deny that it exists, intentionality and causality, but it has no extension. It has no material or physical extension. Although materialists try to make matter, well, they say matter is the origin of intention and causality. That's all right. But so just very quickly then, the I think that there's a separate dimension of the purely spiritual that requires a different set of like the demands of science are appropriate to physicality or things with material extension. Even in the invisible world, like if you could, someone might say there's ghosts. Like an atheist could believe in ghosts, couldn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, there are many atheists who believe in supernatural powers, just not a god.
Right. Right. And so because these things, although invisible or supernatural, they still what do you call it? They still are appropriately investigated with the classical tools of scientific inquiry.
Well, so what is this other method? Like, because I only think that science is the only method I know of that can differentiate imagination from reality. And so when you say that there's this other tool set that can be used for the non-physical, and I'm one of the materialists, so I think that intentionality is physical. But even if there was a difference ontology or existence of stuff, what is the other method that we can use to investigate that is different than the scientific method?
Mhm. Um, if so, you believe you do believe in intentionality, right? I mean, that
Yeah,
exists, right?
yeah, I
Okay,
believe it exists, but I think it's physical. I think it's a product of the brain.
I understand. And so, um, the intentionality describes why an entity does what it does. Is that correct? Uh, the reason why I do X is because I intended to have these outcomes. Otherwise, I wouldn't do X.
I think so. Yeah, I think I define intentionality as a desire to do something. I think the desire is a result of the brain, but I would say intentionality is the desires or wills that we have in our conscious experience.
Yes, yes. And so that means that there's something that exists which has to account for the question why? Why the action? Why the work? Why the labor? Why the time? And so forth. Intentionality deals with the question of why, whereas the function of material existence doesn't deal with the, like for example, if you believe that material produces intentionality, um, the question is why does it do so? Uh, is I don't know what style of inquiry one would use to try to find out why material produces intentionality. What is it? How did it become character? How did it become characterized or capable of producing intentionality?
Oh, I think it's an emergent property. So I think that the fundamental nature of reality is quantum fields, and then quantum fields combine in such a way to produce the laws of physics, which then combine to produce particles, which then combine to produce chemistry, which then combine to produce biology, and biology produces brains, and brains produce intentionality. And so I think that the way that nature, the physical processes in nature, operate and combine with one another produces emergent properties, and one of those emergent properties is intentionality and consciousness.
Very, very good. So it's I don't want to put words in your mouth. I really want to learn. I'm not here to argue, as you know. But is it's random? It's not real intentionality.
Well, the intentionality that we have is real intentionality, but it came about through random processes and deterministic forces.
Hmm. Okay. Um, but we're not the only things that have intentionality, right?
Right. I think anything with a brain can probably have some level of intentionality.
Okay. Okay. Um, Let me see. I had a train of thought. Do you another thing I wanted to chat with you about? Uh, I lost a train of thought, so I'm not trying to dodge or duck. But another thing I want to talk to you about is that uh, material seems to be defined by self-perpetuation and self-interest. Uh, is that
Material?
yes? Existence itself is organized so that it persists, or is that not the case?
Well, I'd say that would be life. Like life, a living organism would be one that like self-replicates, self-replicating organisms, but material would be like particles, like protons and neutrons. They don't
Right.
self-replicate. So I'd say material is just anything that's made of energy, and life would be the thing that is
But
self-replicating.
isn't the behavior of all material uh, design? Doesn't it perpetuate its own existence? It doesn't go
I
against its own existence. Even a particle, even a subatomic particle, or it's it per- it, it does never act in its own destruction.
I don't know exactly because like there's examples of virtual particles which pop into existence where there's a particle and an antiparticle, and then
Mhm.
they collide and destroy themselves. And so um, matter is self-destructive all the time. It's just not all of it.
Okay, okay. Because I was going, okay, so the combination of being both self-perpetuating and self-destructive is just a natural quality of matter.
Sure.
Okay, okay, all right. So the idea that some people will act in ways that uh, seem to be negative to their own or to their own detriment for the welfare of others. This is just a normal matter, a normal way matter behaves.
Yeah, yeah. So there's actually a number of studies that have been done on evolution and game theory where cultures and societies will have a mix of people who are both altruistic and help individuals, and some will be selfish and help themselves at the detriment to other people. And a combination of these two things leads to the most successful society. So they did a number of trials with, say, ants and some other things to see which societies were the ones that survived the longest, whether the ones that were 100% altruistic, the ones that were 100% selfish, or a mix of both. And the ones that were a mix of both actually outperformed both the ones that were perfectly selfless and the ones that were perfectly selfish. But yeah, both are a natural result of evolution, giving the different processes of survival instincts of the altruistic helping others and the selfish helping yourself. And that's why society has a combination of both.
Right, right. They have to exist in balance. When they're out of balance, they either harm the possibility of the individual persisting, or they harm the stability of the society at large. And
Yep.
you believe that that's inherent in matter.
Yes, I think that's a
And
product
so,
of game theory. Yes.
okay, okay. Can I ask you this question? Most times we encounter something functional. I think, and please correct me, I'm trying to learn here. I think that, so I don't want to negatively characterize a position. I don't think any reasonable person sees something, an existing functional thing, and believes it just got there. Like if you see a car, you don't believe it assembled itself. There's nothing you see functioning well that the normal impulse of mind and the most reasonable approach to it is it just got there. If you see, no matter what you see, if it's a functioning design that is adhering to its design and functioning well, the habit of mind is to presume that it was created. It would be unreasonable to think that a car appeared. So that almost everything we see that what do you call it, manifests a functional design. I think that normal people don't think that they just appeared or just got there. So, but it would seem to me, and this is a sincere question, it would seem to me that an atheist has to do that all the time with millions of things, a tree, an eye, an ear, that we're in constant contact with functional things. And in order to be an atheist, I think, or I'm asking, one has to presume that it just got there, that there's no intentional, there's no purpose for it. Like a tree, there's no purpose for it, or a dog, or can you help me with this one, please?
Sure. So yeah, I think that most of the things we see in reality are functioning fine, but don't have a designer. So like, if we just look at the chemical periodic table, like argon, astatine, barium, americinium, I think all of these function extremely perfectly well in the fact that they have a particular shape and structure, and the electrons go around the protons in a particular shape and bind with other things. And there's different proteins of non-organic material, just chemical structures that are extremely complicated, but they function just fine. And I don't think they're designed. I think that most of the things we see are designed because they're not a product of natural processes. So if we saw a natural process that made cars, we would obviously think that it was not designed, it was just a natural process. And so we see natural processes that make protons and neutrons and gluons and neutrinos and all of the chemicals that are non-organic. And so it seems we don't conclude they're designed. So like if we see a large argon crystal, we don't think that was designed by a mind, because we know that it's made by natural forces, natural processes. And so even though there's extremely complicated things like tornadoes or hurricanes or tsunamis or tectonic plates, there's extremely complicated processes that are purely a result of natural forces. We don't think those are designed. It's only the things that we know that don't come about by natural forces that we think are designed. And so I think most of the things we see in the universe, we probably conclude are not designed because they come about by natural forces. So in the case of a tree, we think that all of the evidence indicates that trees came about through evolution, which is a natural process, in which case we would say it's probably not designed. So we would divide things up into the things that we see that there's a natural force to explain it, and we'd probably call those non-designed things. And then we put a class of things that there's no natural force to do it, and we put those in the designed class of things. And so in the case of trees, I would agree that the atheist thinks they are non-designed because we know of a natural process that could produce the trees.
I understand. Um, my it's not only design, because I know that this is a bottomless pit in the conversation with atheists, and in the issue of trying to understand the existence of God, but it's purpose. So there's purpose, so that things that exist, functional things that exist, they design is secondary. The first thing to come into existence is purpose, and the design is a secondary activity in which we try to have our desire or intention or purpose manifest. So in order to see so many elegantly functioning things and not attribute to them a design, more importantly, I think suggests that they don't have a purpose. The more important thing about uh, elegantly functioning reality is not its design, because that's a place of tireless argument, but its purpose. One would also have to, and I'm asking here again, have to presume that these things have no purpose, like an eye or a tree, or just the end, like the arising of water with the, and on and on.
Sure. So I would say that design would come before purpose, I think, because I think to have a purpose, you need a designer to make the purpose or add the purpose to it. And so I think that if something comes about by natural processes, then it wouldn't have a purpose, because to have a purpose, you need to have a mind that designed it to do something. I think it has an effect in entropy, where life, for example, in trees, interact with the world to disperse energy. And so the reason that they came about, the reason that evolution made these things, was to disperse entropy and a determined pattern by the laws of physics. But I don't think they have a purpose, because I think to have a purpose, you need a designer.
Yeah, actually, design follows purpose. So, what in essence, in a more profound way, what is being denied is not a design, but a purpose. So, in your case or mine, anything we design is purely a result of having a purpose. We would never design something without a purpose. Uh, so, for example, if I were to want to try to visit you, the design would follow from that. It would take, I would have to plan to raise the money and find out train schedules. There'd be a design so that I could manifest my intention or desire or purpose. So if one looks at the universe and, and sees in all of its kind of awe-inspiring elegance and grace and beauty, the key thing one is saying is there's no purpose for any of it, unless you
Right. So
want to call evolution. That's what you're saying.
right. So because I see it the other way. I see it like, if I have a purpose or intention and I want to design something, I have to use all of the pieces that are lying around. So say I wanted to design or to stick something on my fridge. I had a purpose that I wanted to stick something on my fridge. I wouldn't build a magnet from scratch. I already know magnets exist in the universe. The magnets existed prior to my purpose of wanting to create a something to stick to my fridge. And so I would use the already existing electromagnetic force to use these magnets, and then build them in such a way that I can stick stuff to them and put them on my fridge.
Right.
And so the purpose didn't exist to create the magnets. Purpose exists to use the tools that already exist to instantiate some kind of a goal. And so I wouldn't say that you need purpose to exist for magnets to exist. You need purpose to exist to use magnets to make a fridge magnet. And so the laws of physics, the things that created evolution, would be like just the existence of the magnets, the tools that are already there, and they're combining in random ways to build lots and lots of different kinds of chemicals and chemical structures and proteins and things. And then once you get to brains, that's where the intentionality and the purpose comes from. I don't think purpose predates everything that exists. I think that there are many natural phenomena that exist without purpose, like magnets, electromagnetism, and then we use purpose to control those things to do very specific tasks. But I don't think you need purpose for everything. I don't think you need purpose for evolution or for life. I think those can happen by natural processes without purpose.
Okay. Uh, okay. I think what I'm suggesting. I think what I'm suggesting remains the case. For someone to be a theist or to believe in an ultimate spiritual reality doesn't require that matter doesn't exist uh, contemporaneously. So I think that it seems to me, unless I'm missing something you're saying, that in order to be an atheist, one has to look at elegantly functioning things and conclude that there's no purpose, unless you want to kind of divinize something like evolutionary purpose or scientific law. Like you have to divinize something. You have to give something a godlike quality. Uh, otherwise, it seems to me that one is living inconsistently. That we see elegantly designed things. The habit of mind is to presume that this was deliberately done. And yet, to be an atheist, one has to look at zillions of beautifully designed things or beautifully functioning things and say that there's no reason for them to be there unless you want to give evolutionary forces a kind of a divine like authority over what we see.
Well, sort of, I would agree with that. I would say that to be an atheist, you have to follow the evidence wherever it leads. And the evidence indicates that evolution is the only explanation for trees and life and things. And so the rational conclusion based on the evidence is that they have no purpose. So I don't think it's because you're an atheist, you have to look at things and conclude there's no purpose. I think it's because the evidence indicates it has no purpose. And if you want to follow the evidence, you should conclude it has no purpose.
Okay, I'll hold that for a second. I think this leads me to I think it's a related question that I, th- I think earlier on you said that you believe in morality or you believe in good and bad.
Yes, I'm a
You-
moral realist, so I believe in
Um,
objective morality.
objective morality, and good and bad is measured in what capacity? What are the fundamental qualities of something that would be described as good or something that would be described as bad?
I think it's a law of physics, undiscovered law of physics, fundamental to the universe.
So so bad is to try to do something that physics won't support.
No, so it's not all of physics. It's there is a particular law in physics that has to do with morality. It's called moral naturalism. Is the position that good and bad are a subset of things in the natural world. It's not all things. Like gravity isn't good or bad. Gravity is a law, and electromagnetism is a law, and then there's morality, which is another law. So there's multiple laws of physics, and one of them is the moral law, and but not all of them are moral laws.
And the moral law is is generated without purpose. It exists without purpose.
It exists as a fundamental part of reality. So yes, I don't think the fundamental part of reality by definition can't have a purpose, because if it did, then it wouldn't be fundamental. There'd have to be something more fundamental. And so I think that whatever the fundamental nature of reality is can't have a purpose by definition.
So then morality is not tied to any particular purpose.
Well, I think morality is the fundamental nature of reality, so I don't think it can. So like, do you think God has a purpose?
Yes.
Who gave God his purpose?
Um, I don't know.
Because the way I see it is like, if God has a purpose, that means the purpose must pre-exist before God did. It has to be more fundamental than God. And to me, that doesn't make much sense. To me, there has to be a fundamental thing, and whatever that fundamental thing is, it can't have a purpose. Because if it does, then that means there must be something more fundamental than whatever the most fundamental thing is. And so, whatever the foundational part of reality is, the first thing that ever existed, I don't think that can have a purpose, because that doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Unless it is purpose, not have a purpose, but is purpose.
How can something
Purpose, purpose is the ba- uh, fundamental unit of reality. Purpose is the fundamental unit of reality.
why would you think that? Because to me, purpose is a further thing down the line. I think quantum fields are the fundamental thing of reality. And I think purpose is something that comes after brains. And so why would you think that purpose would pre-exist before quantum fields?
I'm not. I'm not sure I understand quantum fields, but quantum fields would seem to me to be just a distant down the line production of things. They would exist for some reason, for some purpose. Or
Why would you think that? Because to me, it seems like the opposite. It seems like the more fundamental we look into reality, um, like we start with ourselves, obviously, the cogito, I think, therefore I am. And then as we gain more scientific knowledge of the world, it seems less and less like it has anything to do with us or consciousness or intentionality. It doesn't seem like particles have consciousness or intentionality. It doesn't like seem like the laws of physics have consciousness or intentionality. And quantum fields are the things that make the laws of physics in quantum physics, quantum mechanics. And so, why would you think that purpose would predate quantum fields instead of thinking that purpose is a result of quantum fields? Because to me, that seems more like what the evidence seems to indicate.
mm, to me, there the only reason why anything would exist is if there were a purpose for it.
But why think that?
I think that by the kind of preponderance of my experience, uh, both internally and self-reflectively and experientially and materially and relationally, every part of my life suggests that nothing exists without a purpose. Every I myself do nothing without a purpose. I do nothing without a purpose. I do nothing accidentally. And if this is my nature, and I'm surely made up of all the things that you're describing, right? Magnets and quantum fields, or that's all. I'm that. And my experience of myself, both in my interactions with the natural world and my interactions with human beings, my interactions with myself and my efforts to have some kind of self-understanding, I find that 1,000% of the time, uh, there's absolutely nothing in my life that ever lacks purpose. And so if I'm the sum total of everything you're describing, it just feels to me inconsistent to suddenly go contrary to everything I know in every sphere or dimension of my being.
I think I would feel the opposite because for me, from my background knowledge, it seems like purpose is kind of like pineapples. Pineapples are a thing that come from trees, and so I don't think you can have the pineapple before the tree. I think you need a tree first, and then you can have a pineapple. And I think that intentionality and purpose are something that can only come about after conscious agents, and conscious agents require something to be made of. They can't be just a basic thing in the universe. They have to be made of other things, like brains. And so, whatever the fundamental nature of reality is, I don't think it can be conscious or a purpose or a brain. I think it has to be a non personal force of some kind that makes all of the pieces required to build a brain, and the brains then build a purpose. And to me, that's what all the science seems to say, is that there's no purpose or intentionality once you go below the level of brains. Like particles don't have those things, forces don't have those things. There's just the stuff in nature, and purpose is an emergent property of those things. And so I don't understand why we would infer or try to think that purpose pre-exists before anything else, any more than we should think that a pineapple pre-exists before anything else. To me, those both don't make sense.
Yeah, basically, without no confrontation here, but you're guessing that these small things don't have purpose and intentionality. You're guessing that it's an article of faith. Atomic particles may well have very specific purpose.
Oh, sure, it's possible. I would definitely say that,
Yeah.
but I don't think
So
there's any evidence to indicate that. I think that we don't have
yeah.
any reason to believe particles are conscious, just like we don't have any reason to believe rocks are conscious. But I have reason to believe you're conscious, and I have reason to believe dogs are conscious. And so if we look at the evidence, I think we're rational in concluding that rocks and particles are not conscious. Even though it's possible, we just haven't discovered it yet. I don't think there's any reason to think that at this point.
Hmm. Understood. Understood. And so all of reality is without purpose until it reaches a certain level of random organization. Is that an accurate description? All of reality is without purpose until by a random turn of events, eventually, I can't remember your terms, but emergent something
Yep.
produces purpose for the first time ever. So reality, all of reality is without purpose,
Well, all of reality until
except until
right.
matter
Right.
randomly generates it somehow or another.
Right. So I think that purpose is an emergent property, and just like stars are an emergent property. So I don't think anywhere in the fundamental nature of reality there are stars. There are no stars there, but stars are a result of the fundamental nature of reality. And I think purpose is a result of the fundamental nature of reality. It's an emergent property that isn't there originally, but came about because other things combined to produce it.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Okay. So somehow, okay. So somehow, oh, morality, is it important or is it just a more pleasant way of being in the world? Is it important in any way? Because it strikes me, if I'm not mistaken, as just it just randomly uh, emerged or evolved or happened or
Well, just to clarify, so I think morality is like gravity. It's always been there. It didn't come about. I think our ability to experience it evolved, but I think morality was always there, just like gravity was always there.
I see. I see. So all of reality is characterized by morality.
Morality is a force that permeates all of reality, just like gravity is a force that permeates all of
Okay.
reality.
Okay. And then, so these, what were you calling them? Quantum fields
Yes, that's the thing that makes all the forces.
makes all the forces. They have morality. Morality exists there as well.
Yeah, it's one of the quantum fields.
Beautiful. All right. Good enough. Good enough. If if you have if everything is characterized by morality, uh, then all one does is add a multi-headed god or add a headdress or add a cross or call him a name or say there's none or uh, I think I can't imagine much more for our conversation to go. I mean, I've hit a beautiful discovery among atheists in which at least you as one, I don't know the field very well, but if it's common that morality coexists with all of reality, even quantum fields, then I can't think of any reason why a theist or any other type of religious believer would ever do anything other than thank atheists for your service to the world.
Sure. So it's actually pretty common among academic philosophers. I think so. Most philosophers are atheists. It's about 70 something percent, 75%. And most philosophers are also moral realists. So I think 65% of academic philosophers are moral realists who believe in objective morality, even though like three-fourths are atheists. So
Mhm.
most academic philosophers do believe in objective morality, but they don't think it's conscious. They just think it's like a law of physics kind of a thing, or something fundamental in reality that's just there.
Yeah, it's it's just how you dress. It's just how you dress the life in which we swim.
Sure.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's been great, discovery for me and a happy education for me.
Sure, absolutely. Appreciate it. We do have some questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
Question from, thank you for the super chat. There it was. Jimmy G asks, born again is a cop out. Frank, can you tell us why it may be perceived that way? I'll hail our Lord and Savior TJump's chair.
Born
I think
again.
he's
Uh-huh.
I think he's
Go ahead,
asking
Tom.
about what it means to be born again and what caused you to become born again. What does that mean?
Well, basically, it's the framing of a Christian experience, and they attribute it to the combined work of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. I'm not a so basically a person experiences some radical limitation in their capacity to be as good as they hope to be or want to be, and as a result of the constant experience of this obstruction, they come to feel that they're characterized by ir, an irremovable an irremovable dark impulse or detriment, or it's called sinfulness or something like that, that there's nothing I can ever do myself to not have these uh, counter forces that are driving me to be other than what I wish to be. And then uh, and so the short answer to that is that I'm born that way. How did you get that way? You're born that way. You have an aspect to your nature that will never allow you to be all that you wish that you could be. Then some Christian preacher comes along and he'll say, you can be born again, born anew, born in God, and this will no longer be your condition. You will now be characterized by a circumstance in which this the weight of this accursedness of your sinfulness, et cetera, will no longer be the nature of your reality. And so then someone will ask Jesus, please forgive me for my sins, even though it wasn't even my fault. I was born. And then suddenly a Christian experiences being born anew, born again, having this great weight of guilt and burden taken away from them. So that's just what born again is. It's basically saying that in a relationship with Jesus and the Holy Spirit, this terrible sense of accursedness no longer characterizes my life. Uh, that's not my religious way of life, but that's what born again is all about.
Gotcha. Next super chat was from Good Question. Good Question asks, does purpose pre-exist before God?
Um, I I would say that in a similar way, Tom, as you would say that morality is contemporaneous or co-eternal with all of reality or quantum fields or something like that, I would say that purpose is co-eternal or contemporaneous or non-distinguishable temporally from God. They co-eternal and contemporaneous.
Gotcha. Good Question also asks, organization is not random, right? So he's asking like organization of the laws of physics, those would not be random. And so evolution isn't random, it's determined by the organization.
Right, and that's a little like that quip or joke when you said, "What does the universe sit on?" and it's turtles, a turtle. You know it, right? And what does
Yep.
that turtle sit on? And the llama says, "They're turtles all the way down." So, if I may, without wanting to sound disrespectful, but the organization, you just keep going further down. How does that come to characterize material existence? Uh, unless that becomes the God, that becomes the divine thing, that somehow that's co-eternal with physics forces or something like that.
Gotcha. All right, next question is Masked Bandit asked, have you ever taken psychedelics and what do you think of them?
I took tons of psychedelics. I thought they were fantastic at the time. I would be too afraid to use them now. Uh, and I should have been too afraid to use them then. I count myself lucky. Um, I guess they're starting to be studied and used in a more careful way. They may have some good help for medical or spiritual things. Uh, I just hate to have some perfectly beautiful person go into a permanent mental debility. That's my only real worry about them, uh, without a lot of care.
Yeah, for sure. There's actually a recent study came out for help with depression using psychedelics can actually really help cure people with depression. So there are lots of potentially very good aspects of them
I
helping with
think
people's
so.
mental states.
I think I agree.
Charles and Solo, thank you for the super chat. He asked, what method do you use to differentiate imagination from reality?
Um, I I guess it's where it seems to land or where it seems to reside. I I don't really have a method. I think I think that they're immediately recognizable for a stable human being. I've never really pondered or seemed to require a method. I feel as though I recognize them quite easily, and I like them both. I hope that's all right for an answer, but uh, how do you tell hot from cold? Or I don't have a method for it, but it's easy for me to spot or something like that.
Gotcha. All right. Next question is I don't really understand this question, but it's from Mr. Creaning. He asks, how can you resolve the there is no nouns, only verbs, anatema foundations of the sutras with a personage godlike Christianity? I have no idea what that means.
Mm, let me see. Anatma means, I think, uh, eternally non-being. I think it's part of the subtle theological debates in Hinduism, and it has to do with nouns. Nouns are existence, verbs are becoming. I think, and so the sutras refer to the sacred scriptures of Hinduism, and one school of thought out of the Hindu community is the anatma, is that which emphasizes that dimension of non-being or non-existence or maya as existence. And so reality it is all verbs, as you'd get it, Tom, I think now, right? Only becoming, only moving, or something like that. And so when you try to quote unquote reify something, that means make it real, call it to exist. You're actually contributing to the illusion of Maya. And the worst thing you could do with the affirmation or reification or of things is to try to actually create something like a god, something as as all controlling. It's bad enough that you do it with a glass of water, and then if you're going to make God like a real thing wandering around, you've really caused some real harm, according to this side of Hindu belief. I think I got it correct. If I,
Gotcha. Big Bad Mama asks, why doesn't Jesus reveal himself more obviously to believers and non believers in everyday life?
um, I just have a simple personal opinion about this, and that is that the uh, from from a very high spiritual place, it's enormous. It exhausts a ton of capital to manifest, um, and it would be like me traveling to give my lottery winnings to an inveterate junkie gambler or something like that. I mean, who calls, um, I just think that the design of Jesus, it's a very challenging and a very difficult one. He cares about the world. He cares about human suffering, and I think his work has to be very strategic and very well done. And so we might think we have better ways of how Jesus might do things, but I think uh, where the fact that we may not see him more easily or something like that is related to him trying to help the world in the finest and most strategically effective way.
Gotcha. Winston's mom asks, we have archaeological evidence early man, pre-hominids took care of their old and sick. Does this fit his definition of morality?
Absolutely. I think it's just a wonderful, by all means, by all means.
A good question asks, since the Bible gives evidence that God performs good and evil actions, why do you think we value good and reject evil?
I I I don't believe a rigorous treatment of the Bible would ever attribute any action to God as evil. Although there is much that is attributed to God that is incomprehensible to human beings and certainly looks evil. Uh, Again, this is just a purely personal uh, 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 opinion. It doesn't bear any weight, but I believe that people describe things according to the level of their spiritual development, and so things may be in the Bible, things may be attributable to God uh, based on the spiritual acuity of the people of that time. I don't want to interrupt the questions, but what you've done with your sweater, Tom, makes you look like a Tibetan lama.
Oh,
By
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, they have,
the
it's
bare
comfortable.
shoulder and the
Yep.
purple color, and there you go.
It is a very comfortable outfit. So I do like the Tibetan monk little toga
Good,
things. They're very comfy. So,
good.
all right. JJ asks, did this conversation change any of your supernatural positions?
Um, no, no. I my supernatural positions are not strong, as I said. They're relational and experiential. Uh, and it's you'd be talking about a friend when you talk to me about God. You're talking about a friend, but so it didn't change much, but it certainly educated me a tremendous amount. It's been very helpful for me. I learned a lot.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next question is from the Masked Bandit. What do Christians mean when they say they have had a revelation? Isn't the Bible reports of people who purportedly having revelations, while people who can't read have had the same?
Oh, I. What does it mean here?
I think the first part's the important one. What do Christians mean when they say they have had a revelation?
There's different communities of Christians and different uses of the words that they allow themselves dogmatically to use. I think revelation is pretty constrained, and a lot of Christian groups would not allow anybody to claim to have had a revelation, but they would rather say that they had an inspiration, or they might even say they received a word from Jesus or something like that. They can say these things, but revelation is usually reserved. Most Christian groups don't allow their believers to claim that they have revelations. But in common parlance, we can use it freely and all the time. I had a revelation that, that my sister's going to show up. You know, it's, you know, and there she was, you know. So there's a common use of the term, but for Christians, I think mostly they have to stick to other language in terms of their own dogmatic constraints.
Gotcha. Good question. Thank you for the super chat. Did Vishnu create Yahweh?
Oh, I don't, maybe. I th- I believe that there's one God. If Yahweh is not that God, then maybe Vishnu created uh, Yahweh. But I believe there's one God, and so I wouldn't have one name higher than the other name or whatever. But that's a cool question. I like it.
Awesome. The last question is from another wolf. He says, when I cannot measure something that does not exist, why should I believe in a magic being? Everything else is imaginary and chatter.
Uh, I when you can. Oh, okay. Again, no need or desire to be argumentative, but uh, I can. There's love. I can feel love for someone. I can feel love grow. I can feel that become stronger over time. I I can't measure it. I don't know what I would use to measure it, but I do know that it has grown. It has become stronger. Um, so I don't call that magic. I call it very real. It's very substantial. I think I'm reasonable to believe that love has grown. So my answer would be something like that, that there's lots of things that don't submit themselves to material calculated measurements. That's how I'd respond.
Gotcha. All right, we've been going for about an hour and a half. It was really great having you on. It was a great conversation. Appreciate you taking the time again. Would you like to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
Okay, I didn't think of that, but I run an interfaith organization called the 12 Gates Foundation, and the URL for that is 12gf12gf.org. And that work is designed to try to help religions cooperate, and certainly atheists as well, because the world needs a lot of caring help, and that's the design of that organization.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Absolutely. I have a similar thing. I'll put a QR code for anybody interested. It's the Church of the Best Possible World is the thing I'm working on. And we're trying to buy apartment buildings and offer them at affordable rates to try and make life easier for as many people as possible. So we have a similar goal.
Yeah, great.
Appreciate the work you're doing. So thanks again. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks for inviting me on. I appreciate it. Take care.